We begin our art narrative in Europe amidst the changing times of the 14th and the 15th centuries. Many magnificent cathedrals had been built in the Middle Ages. Into the 1300s, Europe was prospering with good crop harvests, expanding populations, and a degree of economic stability in the Eurasian trade routes, brought about by Mongol rule in the east. In Italy, where we will focus most of our art discoveries for this presentation, no centralized monarchy existed. The land was primarily divided into city-states having their own varied ruling parties. The kingdoms of Naples and Sicily in the south, the papacy ruling the center of the peninsula, and the numerous independent city-states in the north. Most of these northern city-states began as republican governments modeled after ancient Rome, but by now were experiencing internal strife and the abuse of power by ruling parties. But the primary influence we will see in the arts of this era could have been what is referred to as the Great Schisms. These events divided Europe's loyalties to the Catholic Church and created a larger trend towards family chapels, where art was commissioned by rich patrons to adorn buildings, and a secular stress on the importance of doing good to others, including charities. It may also have been somewhat instrumental in opening the way to what has been called the Renaissance, or rebirth of the classical Greek ideals, allowing a re-look at ancient mythology and the belief in the ideal man. Although in this presentation you will see the subject matter remaining focused on the Christian religious themes, the art becomes more personal and often relates to the human emotions and lives of the viewers, as we will see in the works of Giotto specifically. There is a sense that the artists are feeling more empowered to look around them and describe the natural world, and not necessarily being restricted to a canon of artistic devices that may have been approved by religious authorities in the past. We will focus on Giotto di Bondone, most often called Giotto. He is considered to be the father of Renaissance art, reviving the classical naturalness in his figures and landscape backgrounds. He wasn't the very first artist to come upon these ideals, but he is given this mantle by Giorgio Vasari in his book written in 1550 titled The Lives of the Artists. Vasari was a contemporary of many of the famous Renaissance artists that we know about, including Michelangelo, whom he counted among his close friends. And of course, not having many authoritative writings of that era to refer to, naturally, Vasari has had the last word on the art of the Renaissance for all these centuries. Vasari's account of Giotto portrays him as a sensitive and talented artist even at a very early age. Giotto was a prosperous artist, running a thriving workshop, marrying twice, and supporting 8 children. He was a citizen of Florence and a close friend to the King of Naples. His early work is seen in the frescoes of the upper church in San Francesco in Assisi. This slide is a detail of the life of St. Francis in the upper church. It depicts St. Francis giving away his cloak to a poor man. The next slide, also from the upper church, is from the legend of St. Francis named Ascension. It is possible that he worked on the upper church with his teacher, Cimabue. Here we can see the draperies on the bodies rendered to make them appear 3D. The light source is coming from a single direction, helping to further create a realistic sense of space and depth, and the figures have an overall sculptural feel. These are the qualities that will become paramount in the later Renaissance art we will see. This panel, painted by Giotto's teacher Cimabue, shows a degree of sculpturing in the figures and in the throne. The light source, though subtle, is coming from a single direction. Here we see Giotto's version of the same arrangement. The figures are more rendered, and there is a refining of the features, the drapery, and the painting as a whole. You can see the light source coming from a single direction and illuminating the figures on each side of their same sides. It helps create that sense of space and believability. This same subject was also painted by another artist from Siena named Duccio. Duccio, who painted in the late 1200s, showed artistic conventions much like Giotto. The painting in the center panel is by Duccio and was painted after Cimabue's painting and before Giotto's. You can see the rendering and the depth beginning to happen. but Giotto's painting is decidedly more refined. It is evident in this comparison why Vasari and other art historians through the ages have considered Giotto to be the father of Renaissance painting. The frescoes in the Arena Chapel are considered Giotto's first mature masterpiece and place him as the leader in the development of Western painting. These paintings were executed al fresco, a method whereby moist plaster was applied only to an area of the painting that could be painted within that same day. It is possible that Giotto could have employed members of his workshop to help paint these less significant figures and details of the paintings. Working alone, it would have been nearly impossible to finish such a large undertaking in the short space of 2 to 3 years. The building of the Arena Chapel and its subsequent decoration by Giotto was commissioned by a wealthy merchant for his own atonement and for the salvation of his own father, whom the writer Dante included as one of the 79 people consigned to hell in his Divine Comedy. You can see the color blue used lavishly in the interior. The blue paint at this time was made from the precious stone lapis lazuli, and almost all of lapis gems were mined in the area of present-day Afghanistan. Only the rich could afford to pay an artist to use it in their commissioned painting. Hence, the blue theme in the Arena Chapel signifies the great wealth of its patron. This next slide comes from the Peruzzi Chapel in Florence. The ruinous state of the murals in the Peruzzi Chapel has several causes. They were unusually executed entirely in secco technique, a technique of painting in dry plaster rather than embedding the paint pigments in wet plaster to become part of the wall. The paintings were damaged early on and more than once by flooding from the Arno River. Moreover, they were whitewashed during the second half of the 18th century and were very freely restored in 1841, and underwent a radical removal of overpainting in 1958 and 61. All of this ruined almost beyond recognition the surface of the paint and much of the detail and figures. We will talk numerous times about art deterioration and art restoral in this class. It is very relevant to much of the art we will see. Another example of poor care for Giotto's works is in his giant mosaic, originally situated on the eastern porch of the old St. Peter's Basilica, covering the whole wall above the front arcade facing the courtyard. It depicted St. Peter walking on the waters. Unfortunately, this extraordinary work has been destroyed in the course of its history through subsequent moving and loss. Today we see only a Baroque version in the entrance area of St. Peter's. These next few slides are from the Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore in Florence. The campanile or bell tower was designed by Giotto. The bronze panel reliefs on both the north and eastern doors to the baptistry were created by Lorenzo Ghiberti. Michelangelo himself called the eastern doors by Ghiberti the Gates of Paradise. You will see Ghiberti's Gates of Paradise doors in many art books and talked about art historians. Not all subject matter, however, was religious in nature. Here you see a view of the frescoes on the walls in the Hall of Peace, Sienna's City Hall. It's called the Allegory of Good Government. These murals were painted by Ambrogio Lorenzetti in 1338. The fresco on the north wall in the Hall of Peace is Lorenzetti's depiction of good government. You can see the relative importance of the figures according to their size in relation to each other. The deities above are larger, and of course the king himself is quite large. On the east wall, Lorenzetti painted the effects of good government on the city, and the adjacent is the effects of good government on the countryside. On the south wall, which got the least amount of sunlight, is the allegory of bad government. Besides the haunting figures, the condition of the fresco is badly deteriorated. During this time, the sculptures comprising the altar furniture in the churches became increasingly more elegant and ornate, a trend that continued beyond the Renaissance. This pulpit of baptistry was designed by Nicola Pisano, or Nicola of Pisa. Artists were often referred to by the city in which they lived. The final slide is that of the Cathedral of Orvieto by Lorenzetti Mitani. It signifies that there is still building taking place during this period. This will continue through the Renaissance, with an even greater focus on the decoration of the interiors and of the exteriors of the churches.